Oh man. All right. Welcome to another Tuesday. So a few changes. We'll let chat figure those out. So chat, that's my challenge to you, the early risers, the early arrivals, all that kind of stuff. You get to figure out what the changes are. Uh it's gonna be like some kind of weird Where's Waldo thing. I agree, it is too hot right now. We've cooled off weather-wise here. It was very hot last week, at least for like what the Seattle area usually deals with. Yeah, chat's already like winning it in this joint. 110, man. I'm very glad that we didn't get quite that high this year. Last year we got to nearly 120. We got 119 at my house one day, and we had I think it was like a 4 day stretch where every day was the cool day, which for Seattle this is unreal. Was 105 degrees. Uh, but yeah, I mean we were in the high 90s for a long period of time, and that doesn't happen here. So you know, take that as you will. Let's see, what do we got to talk about? I'm working on a couple of things right now. I have a really big edit. It's just like taking time. Yeah, you probably will notice some audio differences. Johnny mentioned that. It's actually the same microphone that I've had the whole time, but there was a huge update to OBS, which is the broadcast software I use. And I noticed it's putting some type of artificial noise gate suppression in. And I didn't have the time because I had a lot of meetings today. I didn't have the time to go and tinker with it because I actually kind of like a little bit of the random background noise, but because you'll hear like as I start talking, there's kind of almost a weird audio quality to it, but as I continue to talk, it's not quite as bad. But then if I take a break and start talking again, you'll hear something that's almost kind of staticky, and it's because I've got like fans and stuff running in my room to try and keep it cool, but whatever. Whatever. We just deal with what we deal with. So, yeah, chat. We'll talk the new things that chat nailed. I have new fish in the flex. I have a new thing of food here to feed them, which it's the same stuff I like to use all the time. It's just the community crave, but because they're smaller fish, I don't want to use the pellets that I normally have up here for the fish that are in here. There's I think it's 9. I'd have to recount, but there's 9 very young. They're probably 4 months-ish. Upper Tor River chalatharinas in there that I got from Hoon Aquatics. So I did for the members that have been paying attention. I put a little post up. I did a little spoiler that I did a tour over at Hoon Aquatics place over the weekend, over the Labor Day weekend. So that's like feverishly working on editing it because despite it probably being a shorter video, I have shot a ton of B-roll. So it takes quite a while to edit all that together. But hopefully you guys will like it. I wouldn't call it a fish room tour necessarily, but more of an interview. But you'll get to see a lot of his tanks, so yeah. No, I can't keep them in the flex forever, but the Upper Tor River fish does grow very slow. So at their current size, which is, I would say, 1.5 inches or so, maybe 2 inches on like the largest male, they will probably be able to stay in there for at least another 3 months, more likely 6. Which is good, right? Because then I don't have to move them to a bigger tank. But they grow very slow. That's the advantage. They take plenty of time. They'll get to a certain size at a relatively decent speed, and then after that they really slow down. So yeah, there's some new fish that he gave me. He was very generous. I'll talk about this here for a sec before I get on topic, but I had an option between this fish and the Kalitawa, and I chose this fish. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy for not picking Kalitawa. But part of the reason why is that the Kalitawa babies, and you'll see this in the video, they're very tiny. And I just didn't have even the flex. I didn't necessarily have a tank that would be great for them at their current size. Because in the flex, because this is one of the first runs of the flex, there's not the protections on the grates. So they could get into the back chambers, and that could be potentially dangerous. And all sorts of stuff like that. And then all my other tanks, like, they have other fish that are much larger in them. So they would either, like, compete for food or some other kind of potential. I didn't want to risk it with a fish like that. So I chose Upper Tor River. Also, I learned some really interesting stuff about the Upper Tor River in talking with Ryan over at Hoon Aquatics. And that just kind of, like, put an extra little... I guess you say like a that's neat onto that fish that maybe just decide I wanted that one. Yeah, so there's that. Okay. And then, yeah, no hat. Chris Biggs mentioned that, but that's mostly just I was too lazy to go downstairs. All of my like work for the day ended about 15 minutes before I needed to start stream, so I just went over to my sink really quickly, put some water through my hair so it would lay down. Because otherwise you would have seen like my rendition of the crazy hair aliens guy. Because my hair was all over the place. Despite being in lots of meetings, thankfully I don't have to have a webcam on the whole time. So usually I have no webcam and I'm just on microphone all the time. Oh, man. Let's see here. Okay. We'll go on a topic. We've had a few minutes to let folks get in here. All that kind of stuff. And I wanted to do this for a little bit of fun, but also because I've had some interesting conversations with some people recently that aren't friends inside my hobby, and I thought it would be fun. So, fish rooms. Most of us, we all kind of dream of having some semblance of a fish room in our home, especially those of us that are afflicted with the horrible, horrible multiple tank syndrome. We dream of one place where we can fit tons and tons of tanks, and maybe that's our personal sanctuary where our significant other can't bother us, or it's purely economically feasible. I only have to heat the room, not every individual tank. I can run an air system off a linear piston pump and do only sponge filters and not have to use powered filters. That saves me money. And I can do this, and I can automatic water change and all those things. Well, we're going to get into a couple of positives and negatives to a fish room. And there's some people like Screaming Fly Productions, like my home is a fish farm. You've got people like Lucas Bretz who like are literally building a fish farm. But I don't know if you guys heard that. That's like one of the loudest cards I have heard in a long time out the window of my house. I totally forgot to close the window. And speaking of significant others, I think she forgot I was dreaming. So I'm going to message her really fast to remind her. That Labor Day thing messes with everybody's agenda, right? Because it's like you assume, oh, Monday's the first day you work, not a Tuesday. It just messes with your entire clock. Anyway, so let's talk about the pros, because that's the easy stuff, right? Fish rooms give us a lot of benefits. Number one, we can put everything in one place. And instead of having a couple tanks in a bunch of different spots in our house, or maybe I'm only allowed to have the one tank in the bedroom because otherwise my significant other will yell at me, or my cat will get into it, or whatever the heck it may be, right? So if a fish room is a place where we can put more or consolidate all of our fish tanks to make certain things easier. One of the other benefits that we usually associate with fish rooms is it's significantly easier to heat an entire room if all of our fish stay at roughly the same temperature than it is to have individual heaters in every tank. This saves us a ton of money because instead of having something like a 100-watt heater in 30 tanks, well, that's 3,000 watts of power constantly. You can probably get some kind of heating option that takes a third of that, maybe half if you're using like a space heater to do this and you want a really nice one. But you're still saving like that 1,500 to 2,000 watts of power in this kind of concept scenario, right? That's a big one. If all your tanks are in one room, it's a lot easier to run something like one really nice or a specific system of air pumps to drive air to all the tanks in one go so that you can have like, PVC systems with little taps that come down. Think any fish room you've probably ever seen does this usually, like your Gemco linear air piston. They cost a lot less money in the long run than having an individual air pump on every single tank, or in some cases, multiple air pumps for very large tanks. You're just dropping extra taps because you have this one very powerful air system. That can also lead you to make some of your filtration cheaper. If you have a powerful air system, you can probably run something like sponges in every single tank, unless, of course, you don't like that visual aesthetic, and then you're going to go toward powered filters no matter what. So if you're the person who visually, you don't like the look of a sponge filter, and you're going to want some level of powered filter, a sump, whatever that may be, then maybe that's not a benefit to you. But for most people, we're usually trying to breed fish. We might only have a couple tanks that we want to look really pretty, not all 30 or 40 or 200, whatever your goal is in your fish room, right? So we'll look at cost savings. And the big part of most fish rooms is about making things more efficient. Probably the last and most important one that a lot of people look at is automatic water changes, right? And the big thing there is this takes a bunch of time out. It makes it simple, but you have to build this kind of complex system to do your water changes. But when you get that in place, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Or at least that's what we tell ourselves. It does it for you, so that you just always know that at whatever cadence you have set up in your system, it's going to water change tanks for you. Or maybe you just have an easier water change system because you can easily drain water and you've got everything in one spot. So it's a lot faster using like a Python or whatever your method of water change ends up being in your fish room. So those are a lot of our positives. But there's an opposite side to this. A fish room can be very expensive to build because often a lot of us we'll only keep 7 or 8 aquariums in our house, but if we're going to convert our basement or our garage or something like that, all of a sudden now, well, I've got enough space for 25, for 30, maybe even 40 tanks. If I do only 10 gallons, I bet I could fit like 60. Now all of a sudden you have significantly more tanks, which means that the equipment you require, even if you're going that route of trying to be efficient, linear air pistons, heating the room, etc., you need to have the equipment that can handle that many tanks. So you might have to invest in a slightly larger linear air piston than you might have if you were just like at only 8 or 10 tanks, which for the most part, linear air pistons, you're probably going at least 20 tanks before they really become efficient. But still, this is something we need to keep in mind. If you only had 8 or 10 tanks and they were all smaller, the cost to heat a room might actually be more than it is to heat just those individual tanks. And this comes into that buying equipment thing, right? We're buying more equipment. We're putting these things together. An automatic water change system is expensive. Now, if you're just doing, if you're Paul, you're just rocking that 50-foot Python, you only have to buy that 50-foot Python, and maybe what you want in your fish room to run that 50-foot Python is a good utility sink. And so the only thing you really need to install is a utility sink that would be different than what you have in your house. Okay, that's what, a couple $100? That's not so bad, right? But an automatic water change system, you might be looking at $3,000-$4,000 to set that up, possibly even more depending on the particular equipment you choose to purchase and how many tanks you're dealing with. And that doesn't mention the fact that now you have to drill all of those tanks to prepare them for the automatic water change system. And if you accidentally screw up when you're drilling tanks and break a tank, now you got to buy a tank to replace that tank, right? Think about when we were watching Dan's Fish build out the fish annex. He had, luckily, I think only like one tank crack on him that he was drilling. But they were all 40-gallon breeders, so that's still another 40-gallon breeder beyond what you originally bought that you need to buy. There's extra cost that comes into play when we make, inevitably, we're human, we're going to make mistakes, it's going to happen. Or let's say you get that automatic water change system put together, you're like one of my friends, and it leaks. And now you got to go back and disassemble it and figure out the leak and figure out how to fix it. And, oh, I didn't put enough plumber's putty here, or I need more of the Teflon tape there, whatever it may be. Or maybe you didn't properly use the PVC cement and CO1 joint correctly, so you have to break it apart, replace it with new PVC, and do it again, right? It's all of these things. There's all sorts of potential issues that can happen that will cost you more money than you might originally budget for, beyond just the fact of the initial cost is quite expensive for a fish room. An example would be, my fish room, whenever I do it in my garage, I expect to be buying a couple of pieces of equipment that are very expensive. Maybe instead of running a dehumidifier, you want to be a psycho like me and you want to use a heat recovery ventilation system. Well, the smallest version of that is $1,000 piece of equipment versus a $250 to get a really nice dehumidifier. That's a big jump in cost. That's an extra $750, right? And it can be more expensive. And I know that you and I are probably thinking the same way. What fish could I buy with $750? Right? There's those kind of questions that start coming in. Another thing is, as we build out, for those of us, if we decide to go that heavy automation route, like automatic water change, let's say we get the system perfect, it's dialed in, it's doing everything we need to. Do we become more likely to ignore our fish tanks because we're not doing that little bit of maintenance in our water change? Right? We can think of all these beautiful fish rooms we've seen on YouTube. Dean's fish room, for example, it's immaculately clean. My fish room will never be that clean, and I know that for a fact, right? I'll do my best to keep it pretty tidy, but it's not going to be that immaculate. But do we think about the amount of time it takes to keep it clean, right? All of a sudden, if we have way more tanks, how much more tank maintenance are we doing, despite the fact that we're trying to automate certain things? So if we are adding a bunch of automatic water change, we run a risk of ignoring certain things, especially if we start getting lazy on some of our other maintenance. Maybe it's it's the summer, it's super hot, my fish room's still kind of hot. I don't know that I want to go in and clean out all of my sponge filters this week. They can go another week. It's still hot, they can go another week. I got automatic water change, that's handling it all for me, I should be fine. But you could see where some neglect because of that scale of maintenance that we now have to deal with can lead to problems that could become risky for the fish we keep, or maybe for the plants we keep. We deal with some kind of algae outbreak that drives us crazy, whatever it may be, right? It's a ton of these little things that can combine to cause big negatives. But do they outweigh the positive? Right? Because there's totally, like, you could go the devil's advocate here and go, like, no one should have a fish room. Because you're not giving that amazing amount of individual attention to every tank. If you're going, like, high levels of aquascaping, you probably really only want a couple tanks, right? Just because the amount of time they take and maintenance and care to make them look beautiful at all times. But for those of us who maybe were like, I just kind of let plants do their thing, and I want to breed some fish and raise some fish and have a couple displays and have a lot of space to keep a lot of things that I want to keep, or just like, I want to breed a lot of this fish because I like this fish so much, so I'm going to have 10 tanks just dedicated to that fish. That's where something like a fish room becomes way, way, way more useful, because we can build things out at some level of scale. We can spend that admittedly high initial cost, but then go back and look at, well, I did that so that I can keep this many tanks without making it a full-time job. And still be able to, like, work my normal job while enjoying my fish, right? Those kind of things are what we look at. So I'm going to ask this. Based on some of the things I've said, I want to know what you have to say in chat. For the folks in the comments who are watching on the replay squad, let me know too with your comment. Are fish rooms worth it? Keep in mind both sides of this. There's positives and negatives. I want to know, to you, is a fish room worth it? For a lot of us, it's probably the dream, right? It's one of the dreams for me. But I think it's a good question. Jimmy P's Aquariums has a cool comment. I have a serious illness. I started my fish room around 18 months ago as therapy. It gives me responsibility and keeps my mind on something positive. It's working. For you, absolutely a fish room is worth it, right? I've dealt with friends and family members that deal with certain issues. And for them, certain hobbies that are on the level of me and fish are what they use to keep that positive mind frame, to have better mental health. And in those cases, absolutely, right? It's no question. It's no question the positive effect for you. And that's important. And you're gonna have folks that are going, like, say, Pete in chat is like, I'd rather have an aquarium gallery or studio as opposed to a fish room. It's still a fish room. You're just a pretty fish room, right? You're still a fish room. Don't get too fancy on me, Pete. Leo209 says, yes, they are worth it. Aquariums bring peace of mind. But just keep in mind, they can bring stress too. Every once in a while when things don't go your way, they bring a bit of stress. But, I mean, this is, like, stuff like this is great. Anytime I see something like what Angie Bird said, I gave up alcohol for fish. Much better thing to be addicted to. Absolutely agree. A good friend of mine who's been sober for, and he's closing in on a decade at this point. Joel Corvus Oskin, right? Fish are a big part of what helped him recover and go sober. And for a lot of people, like, if you can find that thing that breaks you away from especially a damaging habit like that, right? It's so incredible. Or for a lot of us, it's just stress relief, right? And Brandon, I think, puts this perfectly. It's worth it to the right person. I've kind of, like, baited this conversation because I don't think there's going to be any of us in here suddenly going to go, you know what? Bentley's right. Fish rooms aren't worth it. Most of us are so committed to our hobby that even a small fish room, like a little, the akin of a small bedroom in our house where we could keep, like, a few extra tanks, more than we do now, just so that we get that little extra bit of what we really love, is perfect for us, right? We don't necessarily have to be like Lucas Brett's, although Chuck Davis is aspiring to be more like LRB, right? And have like 200 aquariums or whatever he had at one point. And I'm sure now he will have even more at his new place because he's got so much more room. But, not everybody's going that route. And I didn't even get into the like the parts about planning a fish room ahead of time versus not planning it, and how like that can be a nightmare scenario. I didn't want to go that deep, right? I want this to be kind of a fun, lighthearted conversation. Have a little fun with it, because I know that deep down, all of us are probably in the "of course I want a fish room, what are you talking about" category of life. Oh man. Yeah, and there's like another Jennifer Weaver has a great comment here too. Like, if your interest is breeding, you are already taking or talking. Excuse me, I can English. Talking more than just 1 or 2 tanks for the breeders, plus then grow out. Yeah, absolutely. Most of us who are like really getting into fish stuff, especially if we want to breed fish, you're already like, well, I need like 10 tanks just to do this part. So why wouldn't I want a room dedicated to it so that I have even more room or can do this better or whatever it may be, right? Of course. I want to have a little fun. What do you want from me? Oh, man. Okay, so with that being said, we can get, other than like as we get more comments in chat, but we'll get off this. We'll go to the usual like kind of question and answer session. So if you have a question, at Bentley Pasco in chat makes it super easy for me to see your question, and we'll do some Q&A while we just have fun and relax on this Tuesday. Just a heads up for those present, next week is a Greater Seattle Aquarium Society meeting, and Gary Lang's in town, so I'm going to be at that. We won't have a live stream next week. I'm going to do a pre-recorded question and answer thing. So what I'll be doing is putting up a community poll, basically tomorrow. And if you have a question you would like me to answer in the kind of live stream replacement video, put it there, and I will answer it in that video for you. If you need an absolutely urgent answer, I'll do my best to answer it quickly and shortly, but I'll give probably a more detailed answer in the video, if that makes sense. Chuck Davis, I put Endlers in a nano tank, now I need a 125. Oh, man. Paul Saltero, keeping fish and gardening keep the little gray cells stimulated and lets you stare at something for a long time. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things that can help us inherently keep the brain active and keep ourselves active. Because, I mean, there's so many stories, especially of folks after they retire, which, you know, I know many of us are all striving for that day where we get to retire and not have to necessarily work anymore. I'm very fortunate in that, despite the stress that my job brings, I love my job. So the fact that I am kind of a workaholic helps because I like what I do. But yeah, anything that keeps you going and keeps you busy is so important. I can't tell you the number of stories I've seen of people, like, they retire and not long after that, because they don't have something to keep them active, they just completely fall off, whether it's their mental acuity starts to degrade, or in some cases, unfortunately, they pass. You know, it's kind of scary to think about that stuff, that we're so conditioned for so many years to like have something that keeps us moving and has everything clicking and doing its thing. And then all of a sudden, well, like, now I get to finally relax and rest. And it's just like the rest of the body just shuts down. It's kind of scary. The best part about fish, though, there's kind of always work with fish. Even if you only got 1 tank, there's always something you probably could do in your tank. Something to keep you busy. Or at least just watch them swim and relax. That's always nice. That's always nice. Oh, let's see here. Adam, I would take it one step further and add outdoor summer tubs for the warm months and a fish room for the cold months. Variety is the spice of life. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of people who totally do all that stuff, right? I live in a place where, like, we're starting to get warm weather slightly longer, but usually our warm weather is so short-lived that you have to be very careful about what you choose for your, like, summer tub fish. Because you'll get days where it's like, it's 80 degrees outside, and then at night it's 50. And there are plenty of fish that just can't handle that. So yeah. That's why white clouds are amazing in Seattle. they can handle everything. Or rice fish is the other one right now. They can handle a ton. Okay. this is kind of a fun question from Sibo Sound. What is something that you enjoy that surprised you about creating YouTube videos? All right, all right. The thing that surprises me the most in the grand scheme of thing of YouTube is just the, despite always having been a small channel, because right, it's like in the grand scheme of YouTube, my channel is tiny. But the amount of people who really engage with individual creators and that fantastic feeling of when you get to meet some of those people in person for the first time. It's like, I'll tell the story again, but like when I went out to Triple Crown, day one, I met there's somebody I've already met once before. There's a new guy that I hadn't met, and then Lady Dan comes up, introduces herself, and gives me a big old kiss on the cheek. And like, how can you not feel fantastic when that's your interaction, right? And it's this person like you've had in chat or you've had in comments, whatever it may be, and you kind of have a feel for just that this person is awesome. And you finally get to meet them in person. And just being able to sit and talk with people and know that like you have such a mutual love of your hobby that you've been able to form effectively a friendship over something as small as fish. And it's the digital age which helps this even more, right? YouTube for me is like the hobby of my hobby. And as much as like editing can be a nightmare for some people, I kind of like it because it's a challenge, right? It's something that makes me flex a different part of my brain and try to figure out some technical stuff and try to make things look the best I possibly can. The more I learn about like using my cameras and stuff like that is stuff that I find more and more interesting. All those kind of little like technical aspects, but nothing compares to that interaction side of things. I've met a lot of people that I would have otherwise never known, and including people that I absolutely respect and love inside of this hobby, and I follow their work on YouTube and just how they do things in Fish and what they teach, whether they do talks or whatever they may do, because there's quite a few different people. That part has been the thing that's always surprises me because it never gets old, if that makes sense. The social side of YouTube, especially in Fish, because the Fish community is so like warm and welcoming and we're just such positive people. It's very rare to get your jerks. We're like, I started in gaming. And I've been a gamer for years, and that community is pretty brutal. You don't get the ratio of nice people to jerks like you do here, where it's like for every one jerk, there's at least 100 awesome people. And gaming, it's like, yeah, it's kind of a coin flip because just people are so indentured, or that's not the right word, ingrained in kind of the culture that surrounds gaming, which can be very, very abrasive. And it's just kind of what that side of life is. But it's always surprising every time I meet somebody new. Like, again, I met Mary Page Flynn, or like Science Gal Aquatics, right? Carrie has her own channel. And she lit up when we finally got to say hello to each other for the first time in person. Getting surprised by people that like I only briefly knew before. So like Chris Biggs, who was in chat earlier, I don't know if Biggs is still listening, but like just sitting down with him with that like kind of pseudo interview and having that guy just make me practically fall out of the chair. I am laughing so hard, and it's the first time we've ever met each other. Right? Those interactions are the most precious part about what makes doing YouTube worth it. And I know this is a much longer answer than you probably expected, but I can't help it. I talk too much. Oh, okay. We'll try to get back on track with fish stuff. Whew. Just like I kind of had a rant last week, we got to have another one this week, right? Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. From Leo209, a plant question. Do you really need to dose iron and carbon separate besides the easy green? Well, I don't really ever dose carbon. But you technically do not need to dose the iron separate because of the type of iron that is used in easy iron. The only time where you really need to dose things separate is usually when you're using powdered fertilizers, because they typically don't have... They either use a slightly different source or they're missing one of the small stabilizers that prevents that negative interaction. But usually in all the liquid ones, you don't need to do so, especially anything that comes from an all-in-one, because if it is a true all-in-one, it already has that small stabilizer as a part of its mix that prevents that from happening. But yeah. Love you, dog. 11 of 13 active aquariums have fry in them. Now what? Well, clearly you have to get 2 more. You have to complete the whole cycle, right? Or you have a bunch of fish to sell at your local fish store. Depends on which side of that coin you want to play. Robert Johnson. Hello. I'm getting my first rainbow fish soon, Bozeman Eye. Do you think 9 would look too empty in a 210 gallon with a group of clowns? Also, could I do all males? I don't think it'll look too empty. It does depend on, a little bit, which species. And, well, I should say more accurately, which catch location. So, like, if you're getting a Tinjo, they really only get about yay big, which is about 4 to 4.5 inches. And it takes a while to get that size. So if you think about that, right, 9 4.5-inch fish in a 210 gallon, that's probably still going to pop pretty well, right? And if you do all males, yes, you can do all males. The only thing that you'll want to keep in mind is when you do an all-male rainbow fish group, if there are no females, there's going to be certain behavior out of those rainbows you're never going to see, which is their courting behavior. You'll see them spar with some of the other males, and they'll show their colors, their flail, their fins, but they won't show, typically, that big breeding stripe that comes all the way from the front of the dorsal fin to the tip of their nose, which in the case of Bozeman Eye is basically like a snow white color. It's really pretty. Typically, to get that full coloration, that deepest, most saturated color that males will show, they need to have females to show off for. But is the difference, depending on the species you get, going to matter so much? Probably not. You probably still have really great looking fish with a bunch of males, especially if you give them lots of room to swim. Lots of room to swim is usually very, very good to make some rainbows happy. Just give them some plants, a nice dark background. They'll do all right. If you're looking at, say, like some of the creek Bozeman Eye, so like Aves Creek, which grow pretty slow, they're going to stay small for a long time, so they might not be as noticeable. I mean, I think it's hard to not notice a Bozeman Eye because their color is so rad, but I think you'll be fine. I wouldn't stress too much. And the other thing you can keep in mind is they're peaceful with each other. So you could have 9 at first and decide, I need a few more, and go pick up like an extra 3 or 4 and just add them to the group. And you'll be okay. I barely muted my mic at the time. I did not want to sneeze into the mic. Woo! Kingfisher's catch. So I have a problem. Do you, when traveling to a different town, do you guys check the local buy and swaps for all aquarium related paraphernalia? It depends on how far I'm traveling. Sometimes, yes, I do. A lot of times, what I actually want to do is try and find a local fish store I've never been to before and go through that place. Just because I like seeing what the differences are in local fish stores. So if I'm going down to Portland, for example, I'm probably going to take a trip to the wet spot if I can, just because it's like such a cool and crazy place. But if I was going to, say, California, or maybe the other side of the state where I don't know the fish stores as well as I do my side of the state, then I'd probably look up a different fish store and go check something out, as opposed to necessarily trying to find a swap. Although if I was going to a place where swaps were common, I would totally be going to a swap. So I guess, yes, I kind of have that problem. He said questioningly. Oh, chat jump. That's how you know I'm way too far behind. Jeez. Dan Medina, what rainbow fish or tetra would pair nicely with the Kamaka rainbow? Same question for the Wapoga. Well, there's a couple different Wapogas. Are we talking Wapoga red laser? We talking the Chilatharina eleni Wapoga, right? Because that's different sizes, slightly different fish. There's quite a few things you can pair with a Kamaka rainbow. If you want something smaller, like I'm always a fan of Emperor Tetras. If you really want to go deep down the rabbit hole that is Bentley's brain, I actually really like Penguin Tetras. But that's because they have like that hockey stick mark in their tail that's black, and otherwise they're kind of a silver fish. So they make the colored fish, like your Kamakas, pop a little bit more. But because they're such a different color in that silver body than basically everything else I would keep, they really stand out as well. Plus, they're good schoolers. You could also look at something like some of the tetras that have slightly bigger bodies, so something like a black skirt or a serpe. Of course, you could do the Congo Tetra. What I would try to do is avoid any of the aggressive fin-nipping tetras. So that's like silver tips, Kochu tetras. Those I would just kind of keep on their own. Although not likely to nip fins too much on rainbow fish because rainbows are so fast. But it's just something that you might want to make sure just so you're not accidentally stressing out the rainbows. Because rainbows do dumb things when they're stressed. Let's see here. Bob Purcell, I'm about to have to ban my kids from gaming YouTube. Not liking what they're picking up there. Yeah, some of it can be real terrible. And then there's some creators who are wonderful and they're really good about managing their community and setting some pretty strong stuff to keep people more well-behaved, if you will. Bob Purcell, where did Shrimp House fit in? 307 tanks at the Garden of Eden. Don't worry about haters. Well, sure, that's a little different, but you're still dealing with humidity. Even if you're not heating it, you're still dealing with a lot of humidity, which means you're running dehumidifiers, which will inherently heat the room some. So you still have some issues there. I also am notorious for being terrible with shrimp, so you probably should keep me away from their house. I might be like a pox that just comes through. Although Grant was a peach to talk to. That guy's pretty wonderful. And I hope I get to see him at another event, because just sitting down with a lot of the people in that group, like the Tennessee Fish Mafia folks, Grant and Shelby, I could go on and on. There's a lot of people, but basically getting to sit down with a lot of those folks, and of course, like folks like Paul Sotero that came and hung out, Lady Diane, some of the people who we just notoriously know from like 8 million fish chats, right? It's a blast. Like that kind of stuff is, I think, the best part of this hobby for me, is getting to hang out with people who have a mutual, like, psychotic love of fish like I do. Leo209, so is the iron in Easy Green enough? It depends 100% on what you're keeping. So, like, my example here would be if you're trying to keep quite a few red tiger lotus or any of the red lilies, you will want to supplement iron to get that good, deep scarlet color. But if you're keeping mostly like Ludwigias or plants that don't have any red to them, you don't need the extra iron. It's very unlikely you're going to deal with any kind of iron deficiencies if you're dosing Easy Green as is. Unless you're just not dosing enough in the first place. Oh, here's a fun one. Kingfisher's catch. Joe, you always give me good stuff. One fish room, 20 tanks, one tank size. What size do you choose? So we get to break the rules here some, right? In a sense that it's only the tank size and the number of tanks that are our variables. So in theory, our room can infinitely scale to fit these 20 tanks, right? I'm sure that's not what you had in mind, but so I personally, if I'm choosing only one tank size universally across everything, I'm choosing either the 40-gallon breeder or the 5 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot 150 gallon. Those are the two tank like size layouts that I love the most. And if I had to go to some kind of crazy middle ground, it would probably be 75s. Because they're not too tall. So they're easy to do maintenance in. But if we really want to have fun, I mean, one fish room, 20 tanks, only one size tank, and we're not talking budget here. We get to go to Magical Christmas Land. Is it too much to say 480s? Huh? Could you imagine if somebody had 20 480-gallon tanks in a room? Could you imagine that? Because you'd have them all individual, right? Because they're so big, right? They're 8 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot. That's a lot of tanks. That'd be a big room. But it'd be sweet. That'd be so sweet. Chuck Davis, I'm new to floating plants. Can I cut frog bit roots back to about 2 inches? Yes, you can. Shouldn't hurt it at all. It usually just triggers it to grow new ones. 3G, I'm down to 26 tanks from almost 40, but I have a 33 long on order. But the question is, by going down in the number of tanks, did you increase your gallonage? Because, like, at one point, I took down 310 so that I could put a 40-gallon breeder in its place. Went up in gallons, went down in tanks, right? Ooh, there's another chat jump. That's how we know we're behind. Robert Johnson, could I do 9 males, 3 females, or would the females be miserable? In general, I would typically suggest that you should look at a 1-to-1 ratio wherever possible. And if you can, have slightly more females than males. With only like 3 females and 9 males, they are going to harass and chase the females like crazy trying to spawn. And it's going to stress those females quite a lot. So I would say in those cases, do all males or try to get yourself like a 50-50 ratio or as close to as you can. Like, and you could have, say, something like 7 males and 5 females and it wouldn't be as bad. But realistically, the optimal would be 5 males and 7 females. You want slightly more females than males, and then usually all the females will be in better health and live for nice long term. Hoon Aquatics in chat. What's up, buddy? Agreed on the rainbow fish points. Species like Kalitawa and Myrisai have amazingly intense head stripes that may not be shown in all male tanks. Yeah, it's something like, or even, you know, like the Chilatherina blaheri, they have this like cool pastel kind of peach-colored stripe, and you might never see that if you had an all-male tank. But you got females, you're going to see that no problem. Because those boys are very busy. They are always partying. Garden of Eden, no dehumidifiers though. Woo! You're an animal. But yeah, I mean, depending, as long as you're mitigating stuff properly in your house, it shouldn't be a risk. I'm just, I live in the Northwest and I'm inherently paranoid about those things, so I have to run dehumidifiers or it's bad news bears. Let's see here. Scott Schillinger, do female rainbows spar with each other like males or just the males? I have two pairs supposedly, but the females seem to spar. Females can spar. It's really dependable. Jeez. It's really dependent on the species. I've seen certain species where females never seem to kind of like play territorial games with each other, and other species where I've seen females like more active with each other than the males. So it can happen, yes. It's just a little less common. Christopher Howard, hey Bentley, have to burn 1,200 pots of Anubias and Echinodoros today due to the tobacco white fly being found on one of them. Can no longer sell Bacopa monieri because it can cause psychosis if eaten. Oh my goodness. 1,200 pots? I mean, I'm not super abreast on the like current active list price on those, but man, I don't want to know. And I'm assuming you don't get anything back from the farms on that. I mean, I hope at least there's something where when they give you those notifications, they give you like some form of credit or something instead of just like, hey, you're just out this money, tough S. Like, if that's the case, good Lord. Because, I mean, what, even if they're like, and this is probably way lower than it actually is, but even they're like, say, 3 pounds a pot, I mean, you're talking close to 4,000 pounds? Which, in U.S. money, that's like $22 million? No, but I mean, in U.S., that's still, I mean, close to what, 5,000 U.S.? Oh. And that's probably lowballing it. It's probably more. Yeah, sir. I'm so sorry. I hope they're doing something for you. I hope that it's not just a complete loss, because that's a nightmare. Oh, it's because of Heathrow? Ugh. Ouch. Ouch. James Handy, sand and just a few plants, best substrate depth. It really depends on the plants. If you're using like a lot of epiphyte plants or stuff that doesn't have like need a really complex root system, you probably only need a couple inches. Just whatever like looks good in your tank. But if you need something that has to root in pretty well, like swords or crypts or stuff like that, then you probably want to do about 3 inches or so. Oh wow, I was like surprisingly close. Anubias is £3, 6 pence each. I was amazingly close. Talk about lucky. Jeez, that's that seems like a better price than I think folks in the U.S. get. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just not like translating the pounds to U.S. that well, and my brain don't work. But even then, still, I mean, you're talking a huge loss. I mean, hopefully you get to like write it off, right? I mean, I'd hope that that's some level of tax write-off that you get at least to help you some. Jeez, that's a killer. That's a killer, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your shop. That's rough. Matthew Frey. I saw a guy on a fishing channel the other day wearing a shirt that said, WTF, where's the fish? Fish puns, man. It's like I saw the meme where there's the guy that has the desk that has fish tanks built into the desk as the bottom part and the glass tabletop. And it's like the whole like, welcome to my office, right? Those dumb memes like that. I get sent those randomly by members of my family all the time because it's like, clearly he's never seen this. Like, I love you to death, fam. Yeah, I have. I still laugh at it every time, though, because I'm an idiot and I have like a 12-year-old sense of humor. Oh, yeah, it's Killer Kitty. All right. Took me a sec because my eyeballs be old. Is there a magic trick to bulb plants? I can grow a lot, but never have luck with aquatic bulbs. So most of your bulb plants are just really, really notorious root feeders. And if you don't have some kind of nutrient-rich substrate with a high CEC capacity that's going to suck liquid fertilizers out of the water column and down into the substrate, then you really need to be using some level of root tab of some form to provide nutrition at the roots. The other big thing is make sure you're not, depending on the species of bulb plant, some bulb plants don't want the bulb to be buried, others do. So an example would be Aponagitans. Most of them, they want their bulb down in the water. Crinum wants its bulb down in the substrate. All of your bulb lotus and lily plants, all your nymphaeas, that needs to stay up on the substrate, and only the roots of the plant go down into the substrate. So that's another thing that I think gets overlooked. But there's some little finessey things there that aren't, because bulb plants aren't as regularly talked about, that can get missed at times. Okay, we're getting close to the end times, so I'm gonna look for like 2 more questions for this evening. I hope you guys have enjoyed my psychotic rambling. Again, please make sure that you check out the video this week, because I got a lot of really good photography, well, videography, not really any photos, of some very pretty fish over at Hoon Aquatics Place, and I really hope you guys like it, because he's a super cool dude. My favorite meme, Sandy Cheeks, thank you, is the Leonardo DiCaprio holding an Oscar, the fish. It's a great one, especially before he had ever won his Oscar, right? Because there's some photoshops way back about him finally getting his Oscar. It's the Oscar fish, right, from something else. I can't remember where the initial photo came from, but man, it always makes me giggle. Oh, thank you, Killer Kitty. It's very nice of you. But yeah, hopefully that helps. If not, shoot me an email or something. I'll try and see if we can dig in a little bit and figure out what's going on with why you're having issues with bulb plants. Oh, can you keep guppies and Oscars together? Not for very long. Your Oscar will probably eat the guppies. But then again, you might have like the rare super passive Oscar who's just like, I like these little friends, and might only munch on the babies. Or you buy that like Petco Oscar that's like this big, and you think it's going to be a small cute fish forever, and then a year later it's like this big hulking monster the size of a dinner plate. George, you're killing me, man. Killing me. Which, by the way, George, I'm looking forward to seeing you in like less than a month now at this point, or just almost a month on the dot, right? Because you're going to be at Fishtoberfest, right? I mean, it's your local club running the dang thing. I hope you're going to be there. Oh, man. Whew, I need some of those good chuckles. 88 Chevy IROC. Ooh. Now, are we talking specifically Camaro with that screen name? Are you going like the 88 Camaro with an IROC? I have to know, because that's straight in the old memory bank right there. That's childhood is what that's called. Another good rainbow to go along with the, I'm assuming that's Celebes and Bozemanai in a 125 gallon. 11 rainbows in there now. Thanks. So you want something that's not too fast and isn't too big, because you don't want it to bully the Celebes, right? And the Bozemanai are probably pretty chill. Just, you don't want too many sparring competitions to where maybe you could potentially cause some kind of stress for the Celebes. Assuming you mean like Celebes rainbows, the Pseudomcgill, which I'm guessing that's what you mean. I like this question. So if you want a different color than what you're seeing in the Bozeman eye especially, I would look at something like the I would probably look towards something like the McCulloch or the Running River. So these are more dwarf rainbows. They stay smaller, right? You're only really looking at about 3 inches. In the case of the Running River, it's a personal favorite, but it's because it's got a nice red and some golds and some nice, very obvious black striping. And on the kind of opposite side of that is the McCulloch. The McCulloch has beautiful finnage. It's either going to be orange, or if you get the Skull Creek variety, which is now Sahulensis, I think, because they got a different official name, it'll be yellow. But the body is silver with really good black stripes. So the fins just pop, right? They really pop on you. And then they have this nice silver with black striping body that is kind of unique. There's really not a lot of rainbows that show that kind of coloration, but still have amazing color in the finnage. You might have something like a female glossolepis, which is going to have a kind of a silvery green color, but not in all the fish. Now, the other side of this coin that we can start looking at is maybe we want some brighter color to come in. Bozeman eye has that nice orange and a little bit of blue, or sometimes black when it gets really, really turned on and goes super, super deep. Maybe you want to get something that's got something a bit different to it, right? Some nice, different color tones. And maybe we're not shooting for reds. Then what I would look at in that case is either the Chilatharina eleni, because that's going to give you some blues and yellows and maybe a touch of red. Or if you want to go with something a little more unique and different, if you can find them, I would look for Melanotania pygmaea. Now, pygmaea is the smallest of the big bows, right? But the cool thing about them is they have this really nice, like, gunmetal gray color to them. It's very kind of metallic. It's very different than most of our rainbows where we see these brighter colors. But that head stripe, when it turns on in the males, is like rusty red orange. And it just, it's like a spotlight, because the rest of that body is that kind of gunmetalish gray color, right? It really pops. My kind of last option that you could look into here, if you want a slightly easier fish to find, okay, I would look at like the Kamaka rainbow or the praecox. Both for similar reasons. They're very different blue color than what you see in the Bozeman eye, but the Celebes will still have their own kind of pop to them, right? And they stay kind of smaller. So you're not going to get something that's getting big and going to be too much of a bully. And it's not super fast like some of the Chilatharinas can be. Because a lot of the Chilatharinas, they're more stream and river fish. They got a lot more speed to them. They got the kind of like trout body look to them almost. More like halfway between rainbow and trout, if that makes sense. They still have a lot of the rainbow obvious things, like the way their face is formed and all kind of stuff. But they have that more streamlined body to them. And they're very, very fast fish. They make Bozeman eye look slow. So just keep that in mind. There's lots of options out there. A lot of these are becoming more and more commonplace, but there's a few harder to find options in there. Something like the Running River or the pygmaea, a little tougher to find, but not impossible. There's still plenty of really good ways to get them. Aquabid, Dan's Fish brings in those kind of stuff every once in a while. There's a couple of other notorious sellers out there. Roseline 17, who... some of them have like shops on Get Gills or doing Aquabid, whatever. You can find those fish relatively often. But yeah, that's a few options for you. Hopefully one of those is up your alley and works. Okay. Let me see here. We're a little over, but I do want to grab one more of these questions. Alex Kukbanoff. Under Sacramento Aquarium Society, video by Rick Burley of his early 2,000 square foot fish house. Large tanks. All right, I'll look that up. In fact, I'm just going to do this. Store this away for a second. And then we'll do our last question for the night. Boom. So I'll look something up on the interwebs. The Zen Ginger. I have a 2-foot deep, 54-gallon corner bow front that is awful for growing. Will Jung Val, that is already tall and grown, survive potentially? Small starts I tried and just withered and died. So the one thing that I've noticed in my history of trying various vals, because I've tried a couple different species, it takes a while before it gets happy, and it really likes about medium light. So one of the easiest ways to upgrade that light is to get it on risers or get a suspension kit and raise it up, because that's going to spread that light out a little bit more. Now, you might need a more powerful light or multiple lights. That's the only problem there. But a lot of the big problems we run into with bow fronts is because of the way they're designed, it's hard to get light in them really fully. When they start chaining off, though, right, then you're fine, because you can get lots of light to a couple of them, and as the other ones chain away, they'll still feed down that chain because they're all connected, right? And then another thing is, make sure in your substrate you have food for them. Root tabs go a long way because they're super heavy root feeders. They don't really feed very much from the water column. That's a big way to help kickstart them and get them going, is make sure there's lots of nutrients down that substrate for them, and then they'll kick off from there on. That'd be my suggestion. Christopher Howard would love to do a tour of my submerged facility. I'd love to see it, man. If I ever find a way out to the UK, I'm totally down to do one. But I don't know how likely that is in the near future. We'll be honest. Johnny at Dancefish, last comment. Can you tell everyone how Cali Lumpurs are the best rainbow fish? I mean, all rainbows are awesome, but they're not the best. I'm sorry, Johnny. I can't do that for you. I can't lie. Cannot lie. They're still pretty great. All rainbows are great. But the best? Come on, man. Come on. Come on. Come on. All right. With that, for those of you who will be at Fishtoberfest, I look forward to seeing you all there. Video this week of Hoon Aquatics will be coming out. I just want to sell one. Please help. And then look for a poll on the community tab for questions for next week's live stream replacement, because I'll be at the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society meeting. So with that being said, gang, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. And as always, stay awesome.